Welcome back to another Djinn diary. Most of the time you learned about your fear the hard way. In this next story, the fear was over the top. This is the Phobia series. I hope you enjoy them. Story 1. Ombrophobia. The storm struck faster than anyone anticipated. 6-year-old Evelina McIntyre sat cross-legged on her bedroom carpet, nestled in the lower level of her family's Georgia home. Normally, her room, a cozy space with pastel green walls and shelves neatly lined with toys and books, was filled with warmth and comfort. Her bed, covered by a quilt embroidered with flowers, occupied a far corner, while her low dresser sat against the opposite wall. Crayon drawings of smiling animals, blue skies, and rainbows decorated the walls. But tonight, the room felt small and vulnerable as the storm gained strength outside. Rain splattered unevenly against the window, driven by gusts that made the glass shudder. Evelina's parents, Lucy and Alexei, were upstairs, their voices and the hum of the television blending with the distant rumble of thunder. Trying to ignore the storm, Evelina focused on lining up her favorite dolls on the floor. A sudden creak from the far corner startled her. She looked up, frowning. The room was softly lit by her bedside lamp, casting light on every corner. But something was amiss. A dark patch began to spread along the carpet near the window. Evelina stood, watching as water seeped in under the frame, pooling at the base of the wall and spreading across the carpet. The damp spot widened, turning the carpet a deep, murky color.
Mama! Papa!
She called, stepping back as the water crept forward.
There's water!
Her mother's faint voice drifted down from upstairs. What did you say, Evie?
There's water in my room!
Evelina shouted, her chest tightening as the puddle grew, soaking the floor and endangering her toys. Dropping to her knees, she quickly gathered her dolls, cradling as many as she could. She moved swiftly, setting them on her bed, but the water kept coming. Grabbing her favorite stuffed animals, she noticed one, a small blue rabbit with floppy ears, slip from her grasp and roll into the growing puddle. She lunged for it, but her wet sleeves made her grip slip. By the time her mother reached the doorway, the water was rising around her ankles. Lucy rushed in, immediately lifting Evelina onto the bed.
Come here, baby,
she murmured, brushing Evelina's damp hair aside.
Alexei! The water's pouring in down here!
Evelina's father appeared, his face tense with worry, moving carefully through the water-soaked carpet. It's already this bad, he muttered. We have to block it off. He hurried upstairs. Evelina clung to her mother's arm, watching the water continue to seep through the window frame. This wasn't just a leak, it was filling the room, her safe space becoming unrecognizable.
It's okay, sweetheart. Papa will fix it. Stay here on the bed, all right?
Lucy whispered while kneeling beside her. But as the minutes passed, the water steadily rose, forming a shallow pool that covered the floor and swirled around the furniture's legs. Alexei returned with towels and sheets, trying to stem the flow. He darted back and forth, grabbing anything to create a barrier, blankets, old clothes, even the curtains from the closet, but the water flowed over each attempt, spreading farther. Lucy lifted Evelina higher on the bed, her tone urgent. Stay right here, honey. Don't move. Evelina nodded, clutching her blanket tightly. She watched her parents fight against the water, each step slow as it soaked through their shoes. The entire lower level was at risk. Lucy and Alexei exchanged worried looks, their voices hurried. Then Lucy's gaze shifted to the far corner, her face suddenly pale.
Oh, God, Petey!
She gasped, her voice breaking.
Alexei, the rabbit!
Evelina's heart clenched. She turned, staring at the corner where Petey's cage stood. In the chaos, she had forgotten about him. His cage was half submerged, the water nearly reaching the middle. The metal bars rattled as water surged against them.
No!
Evelina cried, trying to leap forward, but Lucy held her back.
Stay here!
Lucy commanded firmly, pushing Evelina onto the bed.
Don't move!
Alexei splashed to the cage, his face tense with fear. He fumbled with the latch, but the water was already too high. Petey lay motionless at the cage's bottom, his tiny form still. The damage was done. Part 2. 10 years had passed since the storm that changed Evelina's life. Now, at 16, she was taller and stronger, yet the fear that night instilled had only grown. What began as anxiety during storms had intensified into an all-consuming fear of rain. Her parents did all they could to help, reassuring her, creating a sense of safety during storms, and enrolling her in weekly therapy sessions. The therapist, a specialist in childhood trauma, guided her through exposure therapy, relaxation techniques, and creative outlets like drawing and writing to express her emotions. The sessions provided some relief. Evelina learned breathing exercises and methods to distract herself, tools to manage her panic. But the underlying fear remained. Each time the sky darkened, each time raindrops touched her skin, that deep-seated dread returned, as if the rain carried a hidden threat meant only for her. Progress felt fleeting, as helplessness always found a way back. Her parents continued to be supportive, placing umbrellas in every room, offering to pick her up on rainy days, and adjusting family outings to avoid storms. But deep down, both she and her parents knew the fear had become part of her life. 8 years later, autumn arrived, bringing shorter days and gray skies. After the school bell rang, students poured out of classrooms, filling the hallways with chatter and laughter. Evelina joined the crowd outside, where some students lingered, while others called for rides. She remained quiet, her gaze fixed on the sky. Dark clouds loomed, thick and damp with a metallic scent that sent chills down her spine. She knew what it meant, rain was coming. Her pulse quickened as she took a steadying breath. It was just rain, she reminded herself, mere drops from the sky. But her heart disagreed, racing faster with each thought. Hurrying through the crowd, Evelina took the sidewalk toward home, a 10-minute walk that she could shorten if she took the back roads. She convinced herself she could make it if she moved quickly. A fat raindrop hit her shoulder, soaking her sweater instantly. Evelina flinched, glancing up as more drops fell, forming tiny circles on the pavement. She felt her chest tighten and pulled up her hood, quickening her steps. The rain grew steadier, and she ducked her head, breaking into a jog. The streets were empty, her classmates' laughter long gone. Evelina's shoes slapped the wet pavement, spraying water with each step as her clothes grew heavy and clung to her skin. Then, she slipped. She gasped, arms flailing to steady herself as her phone slipped from her pocket, landing with a crack and sliding along the slick sidewalk toward the curb.
No!
Evelina cried, lunging to grab it. Her fingers grazed the wet concrete as the phone tumbled into the street, finally slipping down a sewer grate. Dropping to her knees, she peered into the darkness, her fingers clutching the cold metal grate.
No, no, no!
She whispered. She squinted, peering down into the darkness, but only water rushed below, carrying leaves and debris. There was no sign of her phone. Then something shifted in the shadows. Evelina froze, breath catching as she leaned closer. A faint shape moved below, more of an outline than anything solid. She swallowed hard. A splash echoed, and her phone appeared, tossed back through the grate, landing in a puddle beside her. Stunned, Evelina blinked, then hesitantly reached out. It was her phone, wet but undamaged, save for a few scratches. She looked back into the grate, heart racing. The shadows had vanished.
Hello?
She whispered, voice trembling. Only the sound of water filled the silence. As rain poured harder, she stood, clutching her phone. Taking a step back, she finally turned and ran. With each step, a heavy splash followed. She glanced over her shoulder, but no one was there. Then she saw them, large, irregular footprints splashing one by one in the puddles behind her, as though something massive was following. Evelina ran faster, gasping as her house came into view. She stumbled onto the porch, fumbling with her keys before bursting inside, slamming the door behind her. Panting, she peered out the window. Through the rain, she saw the street light glimmering on the empty street. The footprints stopped at the steps, filling with water and blending into the surroundings. Backing away, she shivered in the quiet of the dark house, confusion seeping into her fear. Had she really seen those prints? Or had her mind played tricks on her? That night, she lay awake, the rain pounding against the window. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the rain and the footprints, huge, looming, and always just a step behind. She finally drifted into restless sleep, haunted by visions of rain pouring endlessly, her world submerged, and something watching, hidden in the downpour, its eyes faintly gleaming. Part 3. After several weeks, Evelina's unease persisted, with memories of those footprints forming behind her and the rain haunting her. Even when the skies were clear, she felt watched, as if something was waiting for the right moment to reappear. She avoided going out when rain threatened, rushing home to lock herself inside whenever the sky darkened. But her sense of safety at home began to fade. One quiet evening, the distant hum of traffic drifted through the cracked bathroom window. Evelina stood before the mirror, examining her reflection, trying to force a smile. Showering made her uneasy after everything that had happened, but she continued the routine. She turned away, shivering as a cool breeze blew through the open window. The skies had been darkening all day, and now rain began to patter against the glass. Evelina froze, listening. The sounds of dripping water filled the bathroom, yet the rain tapping on the glass worried her most. Her heart quickened as the rain intensified into a downpour. She moved to close the window, but hesitated when something outside caught her eye. The dark street below, lit by passing headlights, was pooled with water. Just for a second, she thought she saw a tall, distorted shape standing at the corner, unmoving in the rain. She slammed the window shut, locking it tight as the shape disappeared into the darkness. She stared into the downpour, but there was nothing now, just a late autumn shower drenching the empty street. Evelina took a deep breath, forcing herself to look away. It was only her imagination, she thought. She'd been on edge since she'd seen the footprints. The very thought was absurd, such things didn't exist. Yet her anxiety remained. Trembling, she undressed and stepped into the spacious shower, casting one last glance at the rain before turning on the water. Warm water drummed against her shoulders, sending steam swirling around her. She closed her eyes, tilting her head back as warmth eased her tension. The soft hiss of the shower filled the space, drowning out the storm outside. For a few minutes, she almost felt normal. Then, through the haze of the shower spray, she noticed something strange. At the edge of her vision, water seemed to strike something solid, something that shouldn't have been there. The droplets scattered, outlining a tall figure standing against the far wall of the shower. Evelina's breath caught, her eyes widening. The shape didn't move, the spray hitting it and bouncing off, revealing the form nearly as tall as the stall. It wasn't human. The proportions were wrong, too slender, too elongated, with a head slightly bent and shoulders hunched forward, as if leaning toward her. Evelina stared, frozen, struggling to process what she was seeing. Then the figure shifted. She stumbled back, slipping on the wet tiles, catching herself on the wall as a long, gangly arm unfolded from the shape, reaching slowly, almost curiously, toward her. Pressed against the wall, Evelina trembled, her eyes fixed on the reaching arm. Water ran along its length, outlining every unnatural curve. It stopped inches from her face, droplets sliding down in a steady rhythm. Evelina didn't move, barely daring to breathe. Slowly, she lifted her hand, reaching toward the figure. Her fingers brushed its surface, and she recoiled instantly, jerking back as if burned. It was cold, unnaturally cold, like the touch of something lifeless. Its surface was wet, almost rubbery, and left a strange, oily texture on her skin. Evelina stared at her fingers. The figure didn't react, remaining still, its arm extended, its head tilted slightly as if observing her. She needed to escape. Evelina pushed off the wall, slipping past the figure, grabbing a towel as she bolted from the shower. She didn't look back, not wanting to see it follow her. She flung open the bathroom door and ran down the hallway, water dripping from her hair onto the carpet. The house was dark, shadows pooling in every corner. Evelina rushed into her bedroom, slamming the door shut and pressing her back against it, trembling. With only the faint sound of rain against the windows, everything was still. It was gone, or so it seemed. The figure hadn't pursued her. She was alone. Yet the fear lingered. She had felt it. It had been with her in the shower, inches away, as if waiting to be noticed. Had it been there the whole time? Exhausted, Evelina sank to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest, shivering. She'd spent years managing her fears, but this was beyond her experience. The rain might have been harmless, but this was different. It wasn't in her mind. It was real, and it was here. Inside her home. If you're interested in the second part of this story, hit the likes and leave a comment on what you thought of the story so far. And if you want that ghost behind you to leave you alone, hit the subscribe button and have a gentle day. Subscribe.